Acid Bath was a metal band from Houma, Louisiana. The band members were in small swamp towns, scattered around the area, which included towns like Galliano, Thibodaux, Morgan City, and Houma. The band's sound has been described as gothic hardcore, namely by guitarist Sammy Douay, and vocalist Dax Riggs described themselves as death rock. On Encyclopedia Metallum, they are described as sludge doom, which I feel describes them the best. The band formed in 1991, originally under the name Golgotha. Under this original name, the Metallum says that they were from Morgan City, Louisiana. Golgotha released 2 demos in 1991, the first being KLSU Radio and Wet Dreams of the Insane. There is very little known about the Golgotha years, though Wet Dreams of the Insane was recorded at Park Street Studios in Tupelo, Mississippi. KLSU Radio was recorded live at KLSU, a local college radio station which is part of Louisiana State University. It seems that KLSU is still around today, with there even being an Instagram, among other social media pages. Admittedly, I feel like they have a nice aesthetic. On the KLSU demo, there's a song called Dax's Poem. It is also known as Generation of the Zombie, too. The final song on the demo, The Mortician's Flame, is later seen on the band's first album when they became Acid Bath. The only personnel listed on the demo is Dax Riggs. On Wet Dreams, the lineup consisted of Chad Pierce on bass, Jimmy Kyle on drums, Jerry Bucinelli on guitar, Mike Sanchez also on guitar, and Dax Riggs on vocals. The demo was released as a part of Need Freak, which seems to be the only thing ever released on that label. I'm unsure of when Golgotha decided to change their name to Acid Bath, but it appears that they melded with another band called Dark Carnival, while dropping members from the former lineups. When Acid Bath came to be, a person named Tommy Viator played drums for them, then moved on to play drums with the band Discarnate. Dax said that they took 2 bands and got rid of those who weren't really doing anything, and put both heavy bands together. We were really the only bands doing that kind of thing. Dark Carnival had Audie Petrie, Tommy Viator, and Sammy Douay, where Golgotha was Dax Riggs, Mike Sanchez, and Jimmy Kyle. When Golgotha was around, they had a rotation of bassists, finally ending with a Chad Pierce, who then be succeeded by Audie Petrie during Acid Bath's formation. Tommy Viator would be replaced with Jimmy Kyle, though he'd return to play keyboards toward the end of the band's career. Despite my searches, I didn't find much of anything on the band Dark Carnival, and there doesn't seem to be a band page for them on the Metallum. The members of Acid Bath were influenced by a plethora of musicians, such as Black Sabbath, Alice Cooper, Celtic Frost, Carcass, Dark Throne, John Lennon, Duran Duran, Iron Maiden, Kiss, and Heathen, among more. As Dax had said, the whole thrash thing. In an interview with Self-Titled Mag, Dax said that he first figured out he could sing by the age of 3 or 4. We'd play the guitar and sing all these hillbilly songs. By the time I was 12, I'd be singing Iron Maiden or Testament songs in the school bathroom, smoking cigarettes, and people would be like, "Hey, you kind of sound like that guy." A lot of it was just singing in the bathroom, recording myself and playing it back. When I listened back, I'd kind of critique it. At the age of 13, Dax moved to Florida to be in a thrash band with some other juveniles. They all worked at a phone center selling timeshares, and he had been in a band ever since. Acid Bath's first demo was in 1992, entitled Screams of the Butterfly, with the lineup consisting of Kyle, Dewey, Riggs, and Petrie. The Metal Archive state that the demo was live, and it had songs that were later featured on their first album. In 1993, the band recorded their second demo, Acid Bath, which is also known as Hymns of the Needle Freak. With their manager and producer, Keith Falgow, Sammy Dewey had stated that the demo doesn't have an official title. It was recorded and mixed at Signature Sound in Orlando, Florida. The label it was released on is listed as Intensity One Music, the only other release being their second demo from that same year, and third demo overall. Once again, in 1993, the band released another demo, this time called Demo 2 on cassette. It only had 35 copies. One of the songs, You, would later become The Blue on the first album, both songs being the opening track on their respective releases. On the cover of the demo it says, Sweet Pea Loves, which was to pick at Audie Petrie since he would go out of his way to be nice to his fans. The strength of their first demo earned them a deal with Rotten Records, which is an independent label. Rotten Records is still around today, having started in 1988, and is based out of Upland, California. Their website lists many different artists on their roster, including DRI, Goat Whore, Chris Poland, and, of course, Acid Bath. It appears that Acid Bath is their flagship band, with the way their website is designed. Honestly, it's almost like as if their Acid Bath was the only band to make that label any money. In a video, Sammy Dewey recalled that there were 2 other labels interested in signing Acid Bath. At first, they got an offer from Century Media, but they declined it after hearing from their friends at I Hate God that the label wasn't very good, at least of course for that time period. Next, Road Racer, which is now known as Road Runner, took an interest in the band, though when President Monty Connor came to see Acid Bath live, he fell asleep during the show. Later in the future, Connor would tell Sammy that he regretted not signing them. The band finally went with Rotten in the end, and Dewey admitted that they didn't read into their contract for as long as they should have. On August 8, 1994, Acid Bath released their magnum opus, When the Kite String Pops. It is considered a cult classic, and what I would say is their face as Acid Bath as a whole. The album was the result of years of songs put together and perfected with the demos created from years before. On the Metal Archives, the album has an average rating of 95%, which is ridiculously high considering how people on that website can be. The album has 14 songs and lasts for 1 hour and 9 minutes. There was a music video made for the song To Babo Kumi, which has been posted on YouTube by Rotten Records. The video was directed by Bruce Martin of 1171 Productions. They were mostly hanging out in a swamp somewhere, which honestly is like pure Louisiana to me. The song title is Swahili for Land of the White Cannibals. During its music video, the alligator in it ended up biting someone's face. Sammy confirmed that the alligator did indeed bite someone. He stated that they got it on land and started pissing it off so that it would open its mouth. The guy that had caught the alligator put it on his shoulder, petting it like a cat, and said that the gator didn't want to hurt anybody. It was just trying to survive. Then it bit his face. The man threw it on the ground, and then they, which I assume is the video crew, dragged it away, killing it, then eating it the next day as gator nuggets. Kite String, as I'll call it, was recorded in Metairie, Louisiana, and produced by Acid Bath, Greg Troiner, and Spike Cassidy, the latter of DRI fame. Dax stated that the song Tranquilized was about getting high any way you do it, and kicking the earth from beneath you. Cheap Vodka is about getting wasted and killing things, blood, sex, and blasphemy. Track 14, Cassie Eats Cockroaches, contains samples from the movies A Clockwork Orange and Blue Velvet. The most recognizable part of Kite String is, of course, the album art. I don't know why the album revolved around my life during my teenage years, and surprisingly, I came across a physical copy in my early 20s. Of course, by then, the album had already had its cult status, so the CD I came across was heavily priced. I believe it was probably about $23 or so, which honestly was ridiculous to me back then, and even now, considering that honestly it was used, and the band wasn't making any money off of it. You can currently buy the album off Rotten Records' website for $13, and digitally from Amazon for $10. When the Kite String pops is one of those albums that catches your eye right away. The album I saw over a year ago appeared out of the corner of my eye, with its majorly black covering that is contrasted by the loud red letters and off-putting clown. Which, if you don't know the backstory of the album artist, you may not know why the artwork doesn't sit right with you. Ironically, the first time I ever saw a picture of the album was on a forum, years before the previous memory, as a user on there had it as their profile picture. If you're already familiar with the band, you've probably been dying for me to get to the good part. The album art of that clown was made by no other than John Wayne Gacy, a serial killer and rapist that terrorized Chicago, Illinois. There are multiple pieces by Gacy used on the album, which are titled as Pogo the Clown number 15 and Skull Clown 171. They were created while he was in prison awaiting execution. The balloons on the cover even say, "I'm Pogo the Clown," along with the initials J.W. Gacy. The usage of the art was, of course, controversial, as the album only released a few months after Gacy's execution. I have read that Rotten Records forced the band to use the art, and it wasn't Dax's idea, or I suppose anyone else's. But I can't find a source for this information to prove this statement. But in an interview, Sammy Duet stated that they had known a guy from Florida that would get in touch with and write to serial killers, including Charles Manson. They had to pay for the artwork, and Gacy was actually still alive when they got the art from him. What had really happened was that none of the 5 band members could agree on an album cover, and Ron Peterson of Rotten had suggested it. At first, the guys just saw it as a clown, but when they were told that it was a clown that had killed people, they became more interested. The same person would be the same one to get them the Richard Ramirez artwork seen later on a demo. By 1999, Kite String had sold over 37,000 copies in the US, which was higher than average for a band with virtually no publicity and having been released on an indie label. Reviews of the albums are almost always high, with AllMusic giving it 3 stars, Sputnik Music giving it 4.5 stars, and Ultimate Guitar a 9.9. The album was apparently released in 1994 on Roadrunner Records, though I'm not sure why. And truthfully, I don't know if that's even true. That's just something that I saw on the Metal Archives. Kite String was also released as a cassette with, of course, Rotten. In 2004, the album was remastered on CD and released as two 12-inch vinyls as a limited edition. Then a third pressing on clear vinyl with a gatefold sleeve. In 2013, the album was printed again on vinyl, then again in 2014. The fifth pressing had an orange and purple vinyl record. In 2015, the sixth pressing was done on an 180-gram vinyl with a gatefold sleeve. According to Ron Peterson of Rotten, some of the 2015 reprints on black vinyl received the old back cover with the track numbers printed because of production overlaps. Kite String is dedicated to Billy Maupins, Kenny, and Lisa from Monroe. Special thanks that were on the album include Mama Petrie, U-Haul Trailers, THC, LSD, Spaceman, X-Hoarder, Elephant Slug, Orange Socks, Tungsten, Comatose, Dry Pussy, Ty and Q, and Ardent Soul for tattoos, and Peter Herman for the Acid Bath logos. Interestingly, the band thanked Ben Meyer and Ken Carnick of Tampa, Florida, with their help with the Gacy artwork. When looking at the response to the album, there is an overwhelming majority that approves it. But why? What is it about the album sound that people enjoy so much? The easy answer, of course, is just to say, because it's good. Keep it simple, stupid. When you find something good to hear, your ears just know. But to overanalyze things like a real metalhead, I would have to say that one of the main factors for its high praise is just the fact that they were among one of the first bands to create such an acidic, sludgy sound in the metal field. If anything, the band lived up to its own name, where, personally, the music of Kite String brings up images of me washing my teeth with the phosphoric acid of Coca-Cola. And I mean that in a good way. The instrumental aspects of the band conjure images of literal bubbling acid up in a lab somewhere, with Dax's vocals simply and almost effortlessly conveying nihilistic sounds of hopelessness and anger. The song Scream of the Butterfly makes a reference to the Led Zeppelin song Going to California. At least, it sounds like it, with Dax's lyric of, "She smiles like a child, with flowers in her hair, with blood on her hands, into the sun she stares." Robert Plant's lyric is, "Someone told me there's a girl out there, with love in her eyes and flowers in her hair." I think it's elements like this, where established things were honestly bastardized by the band, which I think drew to their appeal. Which, honestly, having grown up in the 90s for a little bit, I think that was kind of just a big thing about that decade in general, where many different musicians and even TV shows would do kind of like a mock or satire of popular things, such as how we can see this in Scream of the Butterfly. They're sort of poking fun at Going to California from Led Zeppelin. When Acid Bath started gaining popularity and they released Kite String, this was really at a point in music history that the term groove metal started showing up. Acid Bath being one of those bands described as such. The song Cheap Vodka is a good example of this, to me, with its thrashy influences coming out. The genres of sludge, stoner, groove, along with doom metal, seems to have gained prevalence during the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. There were a lot of bands described as such during that time period, including Electric Wizard, I Hate God, Crowbar, Down, Superjoint Ritual, and Orange Goblin. Many of these bands from the 90s originated from New Orleans, though of course not all did. But some of the main ones that were in the same orbit as Acid Bath includes Superjoint, I Hate God, Down, and Crowbar, of which those bands used many of the same members. Many have noted the 80s for being a fast decade between crack, coke, thrash, and rising incarceration rates in America, thanks to the drug war. Thrash metal was the big genre of the decade, with bands like Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and others pioneering the genre, as cliched of a phrase that is to say. The 90s cooled things down a bit, and these bands who became famous in the 80s just got kinda weird in the 90s. Though this is anecdotal, I've noticed that a lot of these bands went through just a weird phase in the mid-90s especially. And some people have felt that the 90s killed the thrash genre. In context of the time period, it may have been a potentially nauseating or boring time for metalheads, as the decade brought many things to a lull around 1994. In comparison to Kite String, some of the other albums released that year include Cracked Rear View by Hootie and the Blowfish, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number by Aaliyah, Bowling for Soup by Bowling for Soup, Divine Intervention by Slayer, Vitology by Pearl Jam, Super Unknown by Soundgarden, Live Through This by Hole, and more. And while not all of those aforementioned albums were bad, I mean, some were. In fact, think about this right now. I didn't even write this down. I'm just going to tell you right here. I don't think I've ever met a single person in my entire life that has ever listened to Hootie and the Blowfish. No one. No one. There were plenty of musical releases in 1994, though. I mean, there were Satyricon and Mayhem's albums that also came out that same year. Our society was different 28 years ago, and the accessibility of music was nowhere like it is today. If you wanted to hear new music, you'd have to get lucky with something on the TV or radio, or go to the local record store, or just try to find something different at a live show. And God forbid if you lived anywhere rural, because you were probably shit out of luck trying to find records that were not popular. The corporate media had a tighter hold on the release of everything, with a band's only true hopes of success being on a record label, or potentially getting placed on tour with popular bands. It's much more different today, where anybody can release anything on YouTube and Bandcamp and I guess even Instagram for some reason. While genre division still exists today, it doesn't seem to be nearly as bad as it was decades ago. Even on the internet 15 years ago, it was common for people to hate other genres, with most teenagers justifiably disliking modern country. I don't know why, but that was always something my peers would say, We would always ask each other, oh, what music do you like? Da da da. And if they didn't just say rap, usually the other answer would be, oh, I like everything except country. Honestly. I mean, truthfully, I can't really blame them. I mean, have you ever heard of Honky Tonk Badonkadonk? Like, my God. Ugh. Anyway, thinking of my own experiences, though, during high school, I remember many people, including adults, talking about how they hated rap, and even branding it as retards attempting poetry. I think that this is ridiculous, and it's just one more useless, invisible wall to divide the masses instead of uniting us together. Unfortunately, there will always be a group of people out there who believe that they are better than others. To get back on track, though, I think that genre division really came to a head in the mid-90s, especially in 1994. Almost all of the big grunge bands released something that year, though it seemed to have been the fraying for those bands, as it was the beginning of the end for bands like Alice in Chains, who had released their last album with Lane in 1995 and their live album in 96. And of course, Kurt Cobain's death earlier that year in 1994. I remember watching many shows on VH1 Classic and metal-type documentaries when I was a teenager. A lot of those shows would say that back when the grunge era was alive, it seemed to have been the bane of many metal bands' existences. Some people have said that the 90s killed metal, at least for a little bit. The mainstream media preferred to push grunge and college rock bands on the radio, with releases from major metal bands being considered subpar. Even to this day, you barely hear anyone mention Slayer's 1994 album, Divine Intervention, myself personally forgetting that it exists. With this information, I feel like Acid Bath's success with their debut album is due to the grunge era saturation and incoming death, along with emerging in a genre that saw other bands of similar type in the second half of that decade. I believe Dax Riggs' vocals were novel at the time for a heavy band as them, where the smooth singing voice he'd display wasn't usually seen in bands like his of his time. I think his voice influenced later bands, even those that might not be so good, including Chevelle and Taproot. Bands like those incorporated the singing and screaming clean vocal tactic commonly seen in the new millennium's first decade. As for my why they're considered so good, I mean, honestly, I'd say it's just because that. It's just good. Sometimes it sounds like the Twilight Zone. Other times, like a zombie apocalypse coming to get you. You can sing, dance, and mosh. Some people have written in the reviews that there are filler songs, but I personally disagree. This is just my opinion, of course, but to me, this album, Kite String Pops, can be listened to front and back multiple times. Especially when you blast it pretty freaking loud, you can seriously hear Audie Petrie's bass playing, which honestly, I'm not lying, it was really phenomenal. If life turned out a different way, I could seriously have seen Audie Petrie playing bass in maybe a couple of different death metal bands, because to me that's what his sound was like, and I really love his sound. If you're the type of person that is into doom, stoner, and sludge metal, I would say that When the Kite String Pops is just for you. Of course, if you're the type that prefers black metal, unless you're Sammy Dewey, then Acid Bath may be nowhere near right for you. It's just all personal preference, of course. Having practiced their prior songs and recording them on demos for years might have also helped perfect those tracks that many love. I do wonder if a tragedy in the band's history had catapulted it to cult status due to the bad scenario. Though, from everything I've seen online, the general consensus is that more people seem to prefer the debut over the second release. At least, this was how it was pre-pandemic and when I was, well, pretty much in my adolescent years. Now that you can stream it online, it seems more people seem to love Pagan Terrorist Tactics, their second album. Acid Bath as a whole doesn't seem to have this untouchable god status where a band like Nirvana does. That is ironically felt to be one of the best bands of all time after Kurt Cobain's death. On September 29th, 1994, The band released an EP called Edits. It was released on Rotten Records and had 6 of the songs seen on Kite String. The CD art was created by Richard Ramirez, a serial killer also known as the Night Stalker, who had halitosis and terrible teeth. In 1996, a demo was released called PTT Outtakes. It featured the songs Venus Blue, Bleed Me an Ocean, and Gray Flower. There doesn't seem to be any art for it. A compilation album was released that same year called Radio Edits. The songs would later be seen on their second release, Pagan Terrorism Tactics. It was a radio-friendly version of their songs, with the swear words and entire verses cut out for more condensed song structures. It was recorded in Kenner, Louisiana, and released on Rotten. On November 12, 1996, Acid Bath released their second and final album titled Pagan Terrorism Tactics. It was released through Rotten, amounting to 12 songs, being 1 hour and 13 minutes long. The lineup stayed the same, though Tommy Viator also showed up to play keyboard. The album was written while the band was touring. Pagan Love Song makes references to when the band was visiting a beach in Florida, and some people offered them a deliriant called Angel's Trumpets. Dax Riggs stated that the trip lasted 4 days, and the opening line, "Dying felt so goddamn good today," refers to the band members waking up delirious on the flowers. They woke up on the beach with a seemingly strange, intoxicated state. On the DVD Double Live bootleg, the song was introduced by the band saying, "Rock and roll makes the world go round. Drinking fucking beer and smoking pot. This is Pagan Love Song." Sammy Duet co-wrote the lyrics for Diab Soleil and New Corpse. The former's name is Cajun French for Drunken Devil. The liner notes present Sammy Duet as Sammy Pierre Duet. This was a nickname given to him from Dax in reference to a historical witch of the same name. I actually tried to Google any information on the witch Duet, but the results turned up nothing. The Angel's Trumpet plant comes from the Brugmansia genus, of which there are several types in the Solanaceae nightshade family. It is amongst the most toxic of ornamental plants. The toxicity section on Wikipedia states that the hallucinogenic effects are terrifying rather than pleasurable. The Encyclopedia of Shamanism states that it induces a powerful trance with violent and unpleasant effects, sickening after effects, and at times, temporary insanity. The hallucinations are characterized by a complete loss of awareness that one is hallucinating, psychosis, and amnesia of the episode even happening. Angel's Trumpet can lead to anticholinergic toxidrome, delirium, paralysis of the smooth muscles, confusion, tachycardia, dry mouth, constipation, tremors, migraines, poor coordination, delusions, visual and auditory hallucinations, mydriasis, rapid onset cyclopedia, and death. In the European Archives of Psychiatry and Clinical Neuroscience, an example was recorded of a young man who amputated his penis and tongue after drinking 1 cup of Brugmansia sanguinea, or Red Angel Trumpet tea. This boy was an 18-year-old high schooler without previous record of mental disorders. He had used a pair of pruning shears, and immediately after doing so, he was anxious. He amputated his penis very deeply at the root, though his tongue was not done so deeply. He had tried to calm his mother and grandmother who were there by saying, "Don't worry, don't worry. It will be all right. It will be all right." He was immediately taken to the University Hospital of Martin Luther University, but a reimplantation of the amputated parts was impossible. 24 hours after the incident, the patient was examined by a psychiatrist and reported complete amnesia of the event. I'm unsure of what happened to the patient afterwards. The PDF linked to the Wikipedia page is short and from 2006. Now, I thought it was interesting, though, how the discussion noted that there may have been an underlying condition that would have caused him to amputate. In my personal opinion, maybe he had some sort of undiagnosed schizophrenia. Drug use can actually bring out the condition. Either way, though, the angel's trumpet is very dangerous, and Acid Bath got lucky that they only ended up on a beach in Florida. Though, this story of temporary insanity due to boiling a nightshade reminds me of a certain serial killer. Dewey said in a video that when they did the angel trumpets, it was like acid. The people they met in Florida had an angel trumpet juice that was in an antifreeze jug. He recalled that while walking on the beach with Dax had fallen asleep while walking. The poem/hidden track, Ode of the Pagan, is sometimes cited or referred to as the Beautiful Downgrade, and appears as such in Riggs's poetry books. The hidden track, along with the track Old Skin, make up the two spoken word poems on the album. While in Mexico, the band took a reverse negative photo of the head of a decapitated animal, a goat, according to Dewey, which was originally intended as the album cover. They later decided on using the art by Dr. Jack Kevorkian. The initial artwork can be found on various sites online. The art by Dr. Kevorkian is called For He Is Raised. Kevorkian was controversial because of his euthanasia activism. I am assuming that he named the artwork potentially in satire of the Christian holiday Easter, as the art's title is a common phrase I've seen on Easter decorations used on people's houses. The Ode of the Pagan is actually a hidden track at the end of Dead Girl, which the latter is only 7 minutes and 23 seconds, without the hidden track in silence. Otherwise, the length is 24 minutes and 8 seconds. Reviews of the album overall are good, with an average score of 95% on the Metal Archives. It was reissued in 2003 on CD, then again in 2010 as vinyl and CD. In 2014, the album was released as a limited edition vinyl, and released again in 2015 on a 180-gram vinyl. When asked about why Acid Bath used the artwork of Notorious Killers, guitarist Mike Sanchez said, "The madness, chaos, and romance of Ramirez and Gacy was a tasteful ingredient to throw into our American pie made with Zaire's worst dios. Dr. Jack Kevorkian, featured on PTT, is part of what's going on inside. There are those that praise him for giving them their freedom. Then there are those who are on the outside, wanting your freedom to control. The artwork itself is how things are viewed. As a kid, faster was fun. Out of school, lots of candy, family, and God. Everybody digs out their puppet Jesus and pretends that they know what's going on around them. while watching how cute the little girls and boys are when they bend over to get the egg we hatched for them. Which, to be honest with you, makes no sense to me. Fans at shows typically ranged from 18 to 25 years old, though there were all-age shows that brought younger fans. One man, Jason Martinez from Shreveport, Louisiana, said that he believed the images the band portrayed were part of a sales gimmick, like shock rocker Marilyn Manson. He said, "I doubt that if these guys were by themselves, they'd be that into death." Martinez said that he preferred the music over the lyrics. Sunshine Johnson, a worker at a place called Disc Jockey, said, "Acid Bath is kind of morbid, and they kind of have an evil twist to them. Their music is fine, it's just kind of creepy." One time in Chicago, a group tried to have the band banned from playing there, as this was the same town that John Wayne Gacy lived in. DeWay said that they were banned because of objections to posters of artwork by Gacy that the band were selling. Apparently, one man was so angry that he bought a bunch of the posters and burned them. He was a self-righteous person that took it upon himself to look out for the better of other people, when he should have been minding his own business, DeWay recalled. For some reason, Sammy said in an interview, "Everybody really, whether they really want to admit it or not, has an urge to kill inside them. It's just their natural instinct to survive. Some people go to certain lengths and actually move on that instinct and actually kill people. There's not a message in really any of our songs. If you try to interpret it, I guess it could be like morbid fascination, just like going to see a good horror movie. We don't really try to provoke anything with our lyrics. Our lyrics are more like fantasies that we can never live out. It's an outlet to keep us from becoming serial killers." Which, I have to say, I don't agree with the serial killer thing at all. I've personally never had the urge to kill anybody or anything. And honestly, I think that Sammy was just saying this to be edgy. It was honestly, though, just a different time period, even though the 90s were considered a modern time in my mind. Reading articles about metal from this decade shows the naive mentality that the mainstream and non-metalheads had about the genre. Yes, to some extent, the band's PR was a bit gimmicky. But then again, what functioning adult would seriously believe any of that was real? A simple look at Dax's lyrics shows that he was talking about drugs and punk rock kind of stuff that scared people in the 80s, much like the Sex Pistols did. In my opinion, To Bob Okumi is actually very similar lyrically to God Save the Queen. One article from 1997 was already leaning into the whole Marilyn Manson shock rock is corrupting the youth mentality. While I don't agree that everyone is a secret murderer, I do believe that metal in general is no different than a horror movie. What is the difference between Michael Myers of Halloween and force-fed Broken Glass by Cannibal Corpse? I think that Acid Bath took the metal album artwork to another level by using art by serial killers and controversial people. Granted, Guns N' Roses saw controversy by covering Look at Your Game Girl by Charles Manson. The media freaked out in 1993 when this happened, calling it a publicity stunt. In some ways, the rock and metal genres were already looking at the art and music of controversial people. I've wondered what would have happened if Acid Bath stayed together and created more albums. Would they have kept using artwork by these types of people? Would we have seen the artwork of Susan Atkins or Jodi Arias one day? Sammy Dewey made a really good point at how there was just a different aspect to having John Wayne Gacy's art as their album artwork as opposed to the scary and gory art that you would see on Eaten Back to Life. Actually kind of scared me when I first saw it, like I don't even know how long ago. Vince Locke is definitely an artist I aspire to be as talented as. There really is just something different about this is scary, but that's because it was made that way. Whereas Gacy's artwork is scary because this was made by somebody that actually killed people. The band came to an end on January 23rd, 1997, when bassist Audie Petrie and his parents were killed by a drunk driver who had run a stop sign. They were killed on the Berg-La Rose Highway. The weather that night is recalled as having been stormy with a fog. The road they were on is described as having been arched over with moss-hung trees. In the car was Audie, his parents Kermit and Nora, and his little brother Kelly. The pickup truck that hit the Petries had already swiped another pickup truck before the crash. The driver was charged with having used alcohol and had reportedly 3 prior drunk driving tickets, and wasn't even supposed to be driving at the time as his license was suspended. One source even stated that his license was expired. The owner of the truck was in the passenger seat, with his friend, the drunk driver, driving. The only survivor was Audie's little brother, Kelly, who was 13 at the time. He escaped the accident with a broken rib and a mild neck fracture. Just before the accident, Audie's girlfriend, Michelle, found out that she was 2 months pregnant. A rock benefit was held in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to raise money for Audie's unborn baby. One man figured that Acid Bath had given him plenty of satisfaction over the years, so when he got the chance to return the favor, he didn't hesitate. About 200 fans went to a place called the Pump Room for an all-age, no-alcohol benefit concert which had 8 local bands. The benefit in Sioux Falls raised $1,200 and was wired to an account for Audie's baby. The event promoter, Terry Taylor, 23 at the time, said that he had hired Acid Bath several times, and at the time of the article, Acid Bath were going to come back to the state on March 29th, 1997. The article stated that they had recruited a replacement for Audie. As soon as Terry Taylor had heard of the car accident, he began planning the benefit. Acid Bath drew large crowds and sold hundreds of CDs and tapes in Sioux Falls. Taylor said that the band had told them that they sold more records there than in their own hometown. When word of the benefit came out, Terry Taylor actually had to turn bands down. The roster included The Fall as the headliner, and the other joining bands were Ethel in the Urn, Trike Pass, Floodplain, Zombies in Congress, Transpire, By No Means, and Lost Within. Each band played for half an hour. Before Audie's death, Acid Bath would sell out the Pomp Room when they'd play there. South Dakota was apparently their favorite place to play, at least according to that article, because of how much merch they sold there. Later, the March 29th date Acid Bath was going to play was called off. The band had tried to play after Audie's death, but it didn't work. Some members saying that it just didn't feel right. It was at this point, in April of 1997, that it was announced that the band were breaking up. The drunk driver who killed Audie and his parents was Adam J. Trahan, 39, of Golden Meadow, Louisiana. An article from the Daily Review in Louisiana stated that he would probably be charged with 3 counts of vehicular homicide, that it was his 4th offense of drunk driving, and that he was driving with a suspended license. The article only came out days after the deaths, so at this point the story was still developing. The passenger in the car was Ricky Burnham, who was also the owner of that truck. He had moderate injuries and was taken to the hospital. It was a 3-vehicle collision that happened at 6:20 p.m. The road is described as having been rural and a 2-lane stretch. The truck, driven by Trahan, crossed over the highway's center line and sideswiped a pickup truck owned by a C.A. Withholds. Still traveling in the wrong lane, Trahan collided with Kermit Petrie's car. Audie's father, Kermit, was only 50 years old. His wife, Nora, 43. Audie was 26. All 3 were pronounced dead at the scene. Withholds, the man who was sideswiped, had his car run out of control into a nearby field and escaped with moderate injuries from flying glass. Unfortunately, there is little to know about what happened to the drunk driver, Adam J. Trahan. This person would have potentially been born in 1957 or 58, and he may have gotten married in Texas in 1978. Trahan was convicted of the homicides, sentenced to 15 years. It is virtually impossible trying to find any news on what the man is up to today, though it appears that he's not dead because I couldn't find anything on Find a Grave or other sites. It is extremely unfortunate that he only got 15 years, since he took the lives of 3 people and displaced the lives of at least 3 others. At least 2 children were deprived of their parents and grandparents by a recurrent offender who kept getting arrested for the same thing. It's infuriating, especially when I think about how I live in the state right over. If this happened in the state of Texas, goddamn, it probably fucking wouldn't. He would have already, if this was here, he would have already been a convicted felon after his 3rd DWI. And if somehow he was free with DWIs, the state of Texas most definitely would have given him life imprisonment from the triple homicide alone. I'm surprised that Louisiana didn't tack on more time due to this, plus driving with a suspended license. According to legis.la.gov, which is a Louisiana law website, Section B of 32.1 vehicular homicide states that whoever commits the crime of vehicular homicide shall be fined not less than $2,000 nor more than $15,000 and shall be imprisoned with or without hard labor for not less than 5 years nor more than 30 years. At least 3 years of the sentence of imprisonment shall be imposed without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. If the operator's blood alcohol concentration is 0.15% or more by weight based upon grams of alcohol per 100 cubic centimeters of blood, then at least 5 years of the sentence of imprisonment shall be imposed without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. If the offender was previously convicted of a violation of RS 1498, then at least 5 years of the sentence of imprisonment shall be imposed without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. The court shall require the offender to participate in a court-approved substance abuse program and may require the offender to participate in a court-approved driver improvement program. All driver improvement courses required under this section shall include instruction on railroad grade crossing safety. Whoever commits the crime of vehicular homicide shall be sentenced as an offender convicted of a crime of violence if the offender's blood alcohol concentration at the time of the offense exceeds 0.20% by weight based on grams of alcohol per 100 cubic centimeters of blood. Most importantly is Section D that states, notwithstanding the provisions of Code of Criminal Procedure Article 883, if the offense for which the offender was convicted pursuant to the provisions of this section proximately or directly causes the death of 2 or more human beings, the offender shall be sentenced separately for each victim, and such sentences shall run consecutively. In calculating the number of deaths for purposes of this subsection, a human being includes an unborn child. And reading that, I don't know if I should be mad or if I should cry, because it is so completely unfair. Obviously, something happened that was basically illegal, because there is no way in hell that Adam Trahan should ever have gotten out. Now, according to Louisiana's own state law, you would think that Trahan would have honestly gotten about 30 years per person, or maybe even 30 years total, because he killed 3 people. And despite the fact that Section B states that it may be more or less time depending on that person's blood alcohol level, what I find once again very interesting is that in the news articles I had found, not a single one ever mentioned Adam Trahan's blood alcohol level, which I think is pretty suspicious. In my personal opinion, if you get into a head-on collision that kills multiple people, I don't believe your blood alcohol level would be very low. You would have to be really high, well, really drunk, to be able to get behind the wheel and kill a whole family. I fail to see how this could deter other potential offenders when cases like these grant leniency. At its worst, it just tells criminals that they can drink and drive all they want, serve a little time, and still get out before they're too old. There's nothing here that tells me that this crime couldn't happen again. The state of Louisiana has a closed criminal records policy, so the public is unable to access any of these. I am unsure what stipulations may have been presented to Trahan after his incarceration, and if he has officially reoffended since being let out. And by that I mean anything in the news. I'm unsure of what year he went to prison initially, but if it was 1997 or 98, I'd assume that he was released in 2012 or 2013. Multiple sources state that the drunk driver who killed the Petries, Adam Trahan, escaped unharmed. I have no idea, though, what ended up happening to the owner and passenger of that truck, and if he ever got any criminal time for his negligence in the crime. After much researching, It seems that Adam Trahan has managed to fly under the radar through time. Now, the name Adam Trahan is a surprisingly popular one. There being tons of people called that. I did notice, though, in my research that there were multiple pop-ups in the news over the years about some, or maybe one, Adam Trahan that were committing crimes. I guess that this might have been before any of Louisiana's closed record laws, as there were multiple tidbits in the news in the 80s of an Adam Trahan that was caught drag racing and caught with cocaine and things like that. There was even a picture of jurors with an Adam Trahan in the back. The majority of leads in the newspapers didn't have any pictures, but the ages of this Adam Trahan were suspiciously close to the one that killed Audie and his family. Interestingly, I saw a comment on a YouTube video that said that Trahan was now living in Grand Isle, Louisiana, and he got caught drunk driving again. This was around 2019, though I, of course, couldn't find any mention of this in the news. This time, he didn't kill anybody. There is a news article with an Adam Trahan from Grand Isle, Louisiana, dating back to 2010. It was about how an oil spill was preventing the local shrimpers and fishermen from working. In some cases of an oil spill, there have been people who committed suicide because they were out of work. What was really interesting to me was how the article from the LA Times stated that, around the time of the year that the article came out, Adam Trahan would be out on the Gulf of Mexico on a shrimp boat, trawling from the South Pass to the Chandeleur Islands. Instead, last week, he was trawling between the bar at Cisco's Hideaway on Oak Lane and Arby's out on the highway, fishing for Bud Light. You can't make this shit up. The articles even use images of Adam Trahan taken by a photographer. The image is even available on Getty Images for sale. Interestingly, in the LA Times article, Trahan said of the oil spill, "I look out there and I see my life ruined. There ain't no shrimping, there ain't no crabbing, there ain't no oystering. Well, the only thing I know is shrimping. That's all I know. Now you tell me, where do I go from here? It's heartbreaking, baby. I got no clue what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, and they want to give me a $2,500 check, a kick in the ass, and get the hell out of here? And they messed up my waters? I'm holding it in as much as I can, but the more I think about it, this is just screwed up. Somebody's got to pay." There's a website called Louisiana Serial that also contains a picture of the same Adam Trahan. How do we know that this is the right Trahan? If the alcohol jokes and the picture of him in a bar was not enough, the Trahan in the article was listed as 53 years old in 2010. 2010 minus 53 would mean that he was born in 1957. If we remember the age of the Trahan who killed Audie, that man was 39 years old. It may be a different person, with a 39-year-old in 1997 potentially having been born in 1958. But that's enough for me to say yes, this is the same person. The most infuriating part of all of this is not only did he somehow get into an article from 2010, meaning that he didn't even serve that full 15-year sentence, but even after killing 3 people, he kept drinking. I don't even know if Trahan did time in the first place, in any location. This is once again thanks to the closed records law. Yet, this man was drinking again after ending 3 lives and disturbing at least 3 others. This is my opinion here, but I feel like the system has failed. On Audie Petrie's Find a Grave page, it reads, "Another fatherless baby is in our world because Adam Trahan drove drunk." Audie Thomas Petrie was born on October 5th, 1970, in Louisiana. His parents were Kermit and Nora. The triple funeral for him and his parents was in Cutoff, Louisiana, at the new Saymart Funeral Home. Calling hours were from 6 to 10 p.m. the Sunday after the collision, and that Monday from 8 to 10 a.m., where the funeral then commenced. The surviving members of Acid Bath were pallbearers. In a 1997 article, Sammy Dewey said about the loss of Audie, "It was like losing your brother. Me and him were like best friends for the longest time. I can't believe that he's gone. I just saw him laying in the coffin and I kissed him. And he was ice cold. I still couldn't believe that he was dead." Audie Petrie was buried at Cherami Cemetery with his mother and father in Galliano, Louisiana. Kermit Thomas Petrie was born on December 29th, 1946. He was just barely 50 years old, having celebrated his birthday just a month before his death. His Find a Grave page states that he was the son of Noelle Boudreau Petrie and Percy F. Petrie. He had a sister named Sheila Courreau. Nora Cherami Petrie, Audie's mother, was born on October 20th, 1953. She was only 43 years old when she died. There is no information on her Find a Grave, just that she is linked to Audie and Kermit's profiles. Kermit's father, Percy, was born on June 11th, 1916 in Louisiana. He died on December 21st, 1971 at the age of 55. I do not know the reason why. He's buried at St. Joseph Cemetery in Galliano, Louisiana. He served in World War II as a private. Percy's wife and Kermit's mother, Noelle Boudreau Petrie, was born in 1921 in Thibodaux, Louisiana. She's described as having been a homemaker and a parishioner at Our Lady of Prompt Succor Catholic Church. She enjoyed cooking, bingo, and being a caretaker of family. She passed away on December 23rd, 2009, at the age of 88, as it says on her profile. I do think it is interesting, though, that she passed away on December 23rd, and her husband December 21st, though decades apart. She was buried at her church's cemetery in Golden Meadow, Louisiana. I don't know if Kelly Petrie went to live with his grandmother, Noelle, but I'm glad that he had at least one older family member in his life as he grew up. There was a fund started for Kelly, Audie's brother, though it is no longer active. One source states that they had a sister, though I'm unsure of what happened to her. She was not in the car with Audie and her parents. Officially, I'm unsure of what happened to Kelly and who gained eventual custody of him. I just hope that wherever he is in the world, that he's doing fine, along with their sister. Audie is described as having been an accomplished bassist that everyone loved. He was backup vocals in Acid Bath and Shroom. The band Shroom was created with the idea to have two bass players, creating a unique and heavy bass sound. Shroom was a side band that Audie Petrie had created with some of his friends. The band released one album called Red Devils, Purple Ringers. The album was only released on cassette in 1997 and has 9 songs, lasting a total of 31 minutes. It was recorded at Festival Recording Studios in Kenner, Louisiana. There were 2 unofficial releases in 1997 and 2019, but it wasn't until June 22nd, 2020, that a digital release was available on iTunes. You can listen to it online through the generosity of others on YouTube, and also purchase it digitally off of Amazon. On the Metal Archives, the lineup is listed as having had Joseph Fontenot on bass, Thomas Viator on drums and keyboard, Scott Ledger on vocals, Audie Petrie on bass, and later Kelly Petrie on bass. Kelly filled in for his brother, performing at some Shroom and Acid Bath shows. Tommy Viator used drum machines on the Shroom album. He did keyboards and interludes, and is actually the one who came up with the band name. Initially, he wanted to use the title for a techno demo project he had in mind. Scott Ledger Jr., the vocalist, was only 18 when he joined the band. He was the one who wanted to do live shows after Audie's death, and had pushed for a second album to come out by the summer of 2000. This, of course, never happened. He is said to have a wife and child. One source states that he was in another band called Flesh Parade, though there does not seem to be any music released from him in a long time. I've listened to the album by Shroom, and I honestly really like it. It was quite catchy, groovy, and the first 16 seconds are exactly what I would imagine a mushroom to sound like. There is a tribute page to Audie on a Shroom tribute site. They provided some insight into the crime. Do we have to get tougher with first and second time DWI offenders? Can we stand to see some of our own friends and family members caught in the web of stricter law enforcement without wanting to step in and help them out because we know an official who owes us a favor? Where is the public outcry? When will we have enough? Can our attitude as a community change from let the good times roll to one that is more responsible? Or do we tolerate killers on our highways as we hide behind the protective wall of indifference and non-involvement? It's not our problem. Let's party. We need a passionate leader who cannot be intimidated or compromised. One who has resources and can command respect, is unafraid, and will ask the questions and seek workable solutions. Who can we look to? Public officials? Business leaders? The media? Our clergy? Is there anyone out there? Except for prayers and expressions of sympathy, most of us can think of little to say, and we do even less. But if we do nothing, it will happen again. And this time, it might be my family or yours. Larry D. Vidal. I've suspected that Adam Trahan may have got off easy due to being either a good old boy or coming from old money. This quote from Larry Vidal reads like it is throwing shade at someone or some people in the state government. I don't believe he wrote it just to be poetic. I decided to take a look at Louisiana's governors, and one name kept popping up in the timeline. Edwin Edwards. Edwin Washington Edwards was the governor of the state of Louisiana 3 times, serving in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. His Wikipedia page starts off on the bat saying that he had been long dogged by charges of corruption. In 2001, he was found actually guilty of racketeering and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. He started his sentence in October 2002 at Fort Worth, Texas, later being transferred to Oakdale, Louisiana. He was released in January 2011 after serving 8 years. In 2014, Edwards sought election to the U.S. House of Representatives to represent Louisiana's 6th congressional district, which spreads into most of Baton Rouge, the western shore of Lake Pontchartrain, and south to Houma. If you know anything about American politics, then you might have heard how congressional districting is, well, corrupt. On Wikipedia, the district is noted to have been redistricted in the 90s, with most of their black voters being transferred to the black majority 4th District, though this was thrown out in 1995 when the 4th District was later found to be unconstitutional. From 1996 to 2013, the 6th District included all of Baton Rouge. After the 2010 redistricting, there was a gash in western Baton Rouge, including most of the city's black precincts, and they were transferred to the New Orleans-based 2nd District. Interestingly, the governor of Louisiana during the unconstitutional 4th District was none other than Edwin Edwards. Edwards had long had questionable practices, one time answering, "It was illegal for them to give, but not for me to receive," when asked about illegal campaign donations. He also saw no problem with investing in a proposed building dubbed as 1 Edwards Square, while he was still governor. Edwards would demonstrate his gambling prowess to the press on one of his frequent gambling trips to Las Vegas. His commissioner, Charles Romer, was convicted of taking bribes and having connections to mafia boss Carlos Marcello. Edwin Edwards managed to avoid implication in the Romer case. Romer's son, Buddy, would later become governor for the state of Louisiana between the years of 1988 and 1992. The governor in office preceding him was Edwin Edwards. Romer was then proceeded by Edwin Edwards in 1992. Ironically, Buddy Romer once served on the Advisory Council of Represent.us, which is supposed to be a nonpartisan anti-corruption organization. During Edwards' first term, a former bodyguard for him named Clyde Vadrine made several high-profile accusations of corruption, including the sale of state agency posts. The accusations were investigated by a grand jury, but the investigation stalled when Edwards' administration attacked Vadrine's character. Later, Vadrine released a book called Just Taking Orders, where he talked about Edwards' gambling trips and extramarital affairs. In December of 1986, Clyde Vadrine was murdered by the husband of a woman he was bodyguarding, who believed that Vadrine was having an affair with his wife. By this time, Vadrine had already been fired by Edwin Edwards during what was his third term as governor. What's funny is that the description for Edwards on the official Louisiana site makes him out to be a great leader that did many things for the people. The best part is how the final line says, "He led the passage of land-based casino gambling legislation." Edwin Edwards' final successor was Mike Foster, who had controversies of his own. He ended state affirmative action and set-aside programs, which prompted protest from civil rights groups, yet made him lauded by the business industry. He also had close relations with the lobbying group Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, which is sometimes shortened to lobby. A hypocrite of his own, Foster ran for office with an anti-gambling attitude, while later becoming a quiet supporter of it. He advocated for a bailout bill for the Harrah's Casino in New Orleans, which helped ensure the bill's passing. The company went out of business in 2020. Mike Foster paid more than $150,000 for former KKK member David Duke's mailing list of supporters. He failed to report the purchase as a campaign expenditure, becoming the first Louisiana governor to pay a fine in violation of the state's Code of Ethics. David Duke endorsed Foster for his 1995 campaign. The problem here wasn't even that Foster was in contact and endorsed by a former member of the KKK. That part wasn't against the state's Code of Ethics. Apparently, the problem was just that he hadn't reported something financially. That makes it even worse. Like as if the KKK is part of something that just didn't even matter when it came to somebody who would be in charge of a whole state. To me, this proves how corrupt the system is, or at least was at the time. I wonder if Adam Trahan came from old money, or if his family was chummy with people like those mentioned before. Is it possible that he had higher connections? I truly and thoroughly do not understand how he is a free man today. After Audie's death, the band brought on Joe Fontenot to cover his spot. They were going to play a few shows that year, but overall it just didn't work out. In an interview, Joe said that he was happy to be playing with Acid Bath, though if he had the choice of bringing back Audie, he would. Acid Bath's final show was on April 25th, 1997, in Shreveport, Louisiana. Joseph Fontenot was on bass, Jeremy Bouillon filled in for Mike Sanchez, and they played with Crowbar, Floodgate, and Dead Industry. They didn't get paid because the organizer did a terrible job at promoting and spent tons of money on the setup. There weren't enough people who showed up at the show for anybody to have gotten paid. Kirk Weinstein from Crowbar locked the organizer in a room, threatening to get any money out of him. Sammy Douay remembers this as a fun show, though he's unsure if Kirk ever got any money. After the band broke up, there were rumors that another album would happen. This, of course, turned out to be untrue. Sammy Douay and Mike Sanchez got together to make riffs for a potential third album, which they made a cassette for. It was called Rat Poison because neither could come up with a name. One of them sought rat poison in a box nearby and said, "Just call it fucking rat poison." The riffs were rumored to be used for the first Goat Whore album, though this was not true. The band members then went their separate ways to pursue their own projects. Jimmy Kyle doesn't seem to have done much since Acid Bath's dissolution, though he is credited to have been co-producer for an album called Confessions from a Phone Booth. Around 2014, it seems that Jimmy tried to start up Acid Bath again, reaching out to Corey Taylor to submit a demo to be the vocalist. Guess Jimmy Kyle didn't contact any of his former band members because it was news to everyone else. The revival did not turn out, and simply put, Sammy Duet said that there was no Acid Bath without Audie Petrie. At the most, they would do some sort of tribute band. Mike Sanchez went on to play in Agents of Oblivion, and the band broke in 2002. There hasn't been much heard from him since, and in 2021, he was, I guess, playing with Sammy Duet again, potentially creating another project. Former member Tommy Viator played with Discarnate, as stated before, then played with the band Suffer in 2002. Suffer seems to have split up during that early decade, with not most potentially existing through 2005. It seems that he has a LinkedIn page with some other social media pages, but I will reserve his privacy. Joseph Fontenot was recruited to fill Audie's place in Acid Bath, playing bass originally with the band from 1991 to 92. He played with Shroom from 95 to 97, Damon at an Unknown Time, a band named Shredding Lettuce from 2001 to an unknown date, and Jackknife from 2006 to 07. His profile on the Metal Archives states that he left music to become a drill sergeant in the Army. Apparently, he was inspired by a chance meeting with a young soldier and decided to join. The event happened in 2006 at a truck stop where he thanked the soldier for his service. They apparently told him, "No need to thank me. I do what I do for my family." It was at that moment that Fontenot knew that he wanted to be a soldier. At the age of 31, he enlisted. He's quoted as having said, "This kid's probably 19 years old and has more direction than I did when I was 30 years old. When I got home, I decided I wanted to join the Army." He called his record label the next day and told them of his plans. His manager offered him a bigger gig, to which he replied, "No, I'm gonna join the Army." He then went to the recruiting station the next day and joined. In 2015, he was awarded Serviceman of the Year, as nominated by his chain of command at the U.S. Army Drill Sergeant Academy. He became a decorated veteran after tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Fontenot had lost friends in combat, one due to wounds suffered from an improvised explosive device, IED. Another was shot on guard duty. Fontenot's career started in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and then he was sent to Korea. Afterwards, he was sent to Baghdad, Iraq in 2008 for a year-long tour. In 2010, he deployed to Arghandab River Valley, Afghanistan, which is described as having been very deadly during that time. Eventually, Joseph married, with his wife joining the Army also. She became a radiology specialist, and it seems that the couple had been married for about 6 years, as of 2015. An article states that Joseph knew that he wanted to marry his wife before even getting to know her name. Fontenot has reached the rank of E7, or Sergeant First Class in the Army. He's been injured multiple times while serving and has had 8 surgeries done on his knee since 2007. As of 2019, it seems that he is still serving. I assume he's going to go for the full 20 years, at least, so he can retire one day. I just hope that the VA grants him 100% when that time comes. Around 2005 or 06, Dax moved to Austin, Texas, and lived there for almost 6 years. In a 2013 interview, he stated that he had moved back to Louisiana, though he did say he enjoyed the taco stands in Texas. In this same interview, he said that Acid Bath was like that one band you'd quit high school to play. So when Audie was killed in the head-on collision, it was just better to let the band end, of which he said it has lived on. In many interviews of him posted on YouTube, people have commented that Dax has a surprisingly soft and tender voice. He is a very spiritual individual where he feels connections to Mother Earth, and in many ways, we are the universe's cosmic thinking, spiritual dust that is individual, though also comes together as one. Dax went on to play in Agents of Oblivion, along with Mike Sanchez. One source states that this was the first band he was in after Acid Bath to have released any official recordings. They first released a 5-song demo, which included songs that would appear on the official release. The album itself was self-titled, and a new version of the Skeletal Circus Derails, a song from one of Dax's other projects, was on there. There was also a newer and faster version of Dead Girl, which was originally seen on Pagan Terrorism Tactics. The band broke up after a short tour in support of the album. He then created Dead Boy and the Elephant Men, who released material from 2001 to 2006. The band's name came as a combo of the New York punk band Dead Boys and the Acid Bath song Dead Girl, seen on PTT. Along with that, the movie Elephant Man by David Lynch inspired Dax. The band's website is now defunct. The Metal Archives lists that Dax played in a band called Daisy Head and the Moon Crickets from 1995 to 97. Wikipedia states that it was a project that never took off, and there are only 2 recordings to exist. The first is Skeletal Circus Derails, which is a 6-song recording from 1995, and the second is a self-titled 14-track album, where most of the songs are cut off before they end. The albums detailed a point in Dax's life where it is said he struggled after Audie's death and Acid Bath's dissolution. He pushed for a more melodic sound with the albums, which took precedence in Agents of Oblivion and the Dead Boy projects. Arguably, you could hear him trying to go for this even on PTT, the final Acid Bath album. The live album of Daisy Head is a rather neutral listen for me. I'm not really a fan of it, but it reminds me of John Frusciante's album, Nyandra Lades and Usually Just a T-Shirt. It was just a strange time, though, in general. Both releases aren't really my style, but the Skeletal Circus does show how Dax has the talent to sing in a plethora of different ways. The Skeletal Circus was also a name for a fan site, but now that website is also defunct. The project of Dead Boy was of much better audio quality and truly highlights Dax's vocal talent. It's surprising how he could be so soulful and yet have had an amazing scream on kite string. I'm not a fan of Dead Boy as it's too college rock for me, but I'm also a little biased because I pretty much hate anything from the early 2000s. That said, I find the track title, Stop, I'm Already Dead, to be quite interesting. Apparently, the track was used as the opening theme to the show iZombie, and was used in the 2008 movie Day of the Dead. Dead Boy's first album, If This Is Hell, Then I'm Lucky, was released in 2002, though Dax re-released it in 2008 under his own name. Then again in 2010 under the band's name, also with Rotten Records. The album is available to listen to on Spotify under Dax's name. Dax eventually went on to make a solo project, which started out under the name T. Dax and His Plastic White Soul. He'd perform under that name, usually acoustically. After Dead Boy's breakup in 2007, he stated that he'd release future music under his own name. His first solo album, We Sing of Only Blood or Love, was released on August 21st, 2007. Apparently, it was to be Dead Boy's next album before the band broke up. In 2010, he released his last solo album to date on August 3rd, called Good Night to the World. It has a bluesy rock sound overall. I'm not sure if Dax has any plans to release any more music, as he hasn't released a solo album in over 12 years at the time that I wrote this. Dax hasn't really used social media and doesn't really seem to have any recent interviews. He mostly seems to have disappeared in the past 6 years or so. There's still a MySpace page, a SoundCloud page, a Facebook page, and his web page, though all are barely updated, if at all. In an interview with Dax, he said that he wouldn't want to get back together with Acid Bath, though he didn't think he could sing like he did back then, even if he wanted to. In a majority of interviews with him, people ask if there is ever a chance of Acid Bath getting back together, but it's just really apparent that it's not something Dax would like to do. He's always referred to Acid Bath as his high school band, and it was mostly the product of his music interests at the time, and really what just seemed to have been being young. In the years since Acid Bath's breakup, it seems that Dax has become a lot more spiritual in life, and it definitely appears as if he did some sort of soul-searching after Audie's death. Dax was the youngest one in the band, only being 21 when Kite String popped. Acid Bath had this clear metal look about them, Audie looking similar to Corpse Grinder, and Dax even looking similar to Phil Anselmo back then. By the early 2000s, he definitely mellowed out. Dax stated that the death of Audie was something he still thought about, and even haunted him in some ways. Sometimes he'd go to the gas station and see someone that resembled Audie. It's apparent that the actions of Adam Trahan affected a large quantity of people. In some ways, I think that Audie's death is what caused Dax to mellow out. It's one thing to sing about death, yet another to see someone you love dearly taken away by it. The collision was still on his mind, and he said that Audie's family was just doing something as simple as going to Walmart, and then they were gone. In some ways, it's frustrating that Dax seems to brush off his past with Acid Bath. Some fans feel like he should be proud of that time, though others have accepted that what he made out of his later career. I personally believe that Audie's death affected Dax deeply. And I mean deep. Perhaps he experienced some sort of existential dilemma over it, since there was really no reason for it to have happened. And thinking about how the band was together for about for at least half a decade that they had known each other, and then to suddenly have it all end, and to be your friend's pallbearer. I think that would definitely have a deep effect on someone who was barely in their 20s. I don't want to completely speculate a person's beliefs, though for me, I believe that this tragedy changed Dax's outlook on life as a whole, especially after he became a father. For me, this is how I justify and try to understand Dax's point of view after this chain of events. In the years since he left Acid Bath, Dax has pretty much made it clear that he has little interest in playing metal anymore. He stated in the past that metal sold out, though many people can argue with this point. I've wondered if this statement was more of a projection from him instead of a truthful observation.
Can we say ass on the radio?
Yes.
Ass,
you
ass,
can say
ass,
that.
ass.
He said ass.
Okay, Bart Simpson.
The first.
Sammy Dewey joined Crowbar at some point from around 1998 to 2002. He played in a band called Walpurgisnacht in 1997. He was on the album The Hollowing, which also came out in 97. Dewey appeared on the Gravedumb album in 1999 and is listed as having been in a band called Hateseed, though I couldn't find any info on that one. Of course, Sammy is listed as having been in the band Dark Carnival, which is who merged with Golgotha. Sammy also appeared in the band Ritual Killer with their 2005 and 2015 albums. On the Metal Archive, one of his active bands is listed as Vol, though the existence of the band is unknown. It consisted of Kelly Petrie and himself, though there hasn't been a status update since 2003. In 1998, Sammy played with I Hate God. He appeared as a guest on Choke's 1999 album, Whatever Happened to Mark Twain's America? In 1997, he was on The Hollowing by Crisis, and then in 2016, he was on Grief Relic by Withered. In 2008, Sammy was in Cannibal Corpse's video, Centuries of Torment, the first 20 years. Today, Sammy's most famous band is Goat Whore, originally forming in 1991 under the name Kilgore. I'm not sure what the origin of the name Kilgore stems from. The first thing I think about is Kilgore Trout, a recurring character in Kurt Vonnegut's books. So I don't know if that means he's part of my chorus or if this is just a rang-rang. Officially, the band Goat Whore materialized in 1997, changing their name to the current moniker. The band has been immensely successful, and as I write this in 2022, they have finished a tour and are going to release a new album soon. Their newest album, Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven, is scheduled to come out on October 7th, 2022. It will have 12 tracks and is to be about 47 minutes. I think that, maybe they should release it a little earlier. I think it'd be kind of cool if they released this album on October 5th. Goat Whore has seen many different musicians in their time, many being in close orbit to them. Past members include Pat Bruders of Down and Crowbar, Ben Stout of Soylent Green, and Jeff Golden from Crowbar, and more. What is really interesting to me is how Goat Whore was originally on Rotten Records and then moved to Metal Blade, being there ever since. In 2006, they made this jump, and for almost 10 years, they recorded their material at Mana Studios, which is owned by Eric Rutan of Hate Eternal and now Cannibal Corpse fame. Sammy said in an interview that they were still friends with Eric. It's just that they wanted a more raw sound, and Eric Rutan creates things a lot more polished. Neither way, everything seems to have worked out because Eric now plays and tours with Cannibal Corpse. Unsurprisingly, mostly due to the name, Goat Whore's lyrical themes revolve around anti-religion, Satan, and the occult. Typical black metal things, really. They're categorized as black and death metal, though I found them to be quite thrashy at times, especially in their later releases. The album artwork to Vengeful Ascension is by far my favorite out of all of the other albums. And I would say probably just in general, that is some of the most amazing artwork I have ever seen. It is superb and has great technique. Goat Whore has multiple social media pages, including Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And Angels Hung is now available for pre-order, as I write this, for $9.99. If you turn the price upside down. The band has a YouTube channel, though it's barely updated. They seem to be more on Instagram, and Sammy posts regularly there too. Sammy also has an Instagram for his cat, which dates all the way back to 2015. Sammy stated that he would like to get the rights to the Acid Bath releases, though it would cost a lot of money from Rotten Records. Fans have suggested canceling the contract due to copyright law section 203, which essentially allows a person or their estate to terminate after 35 years. Even so, if he and the others decided to do this, it wouldn't be until at least 2028. And crazy enough, but one person even suggested maybe re-recording it and pulling a Taylor Swift. Though, honestly, I don't know how that would work when it comes to, the money part of the copyright. Sammy Dewey has been a great source of information on the history of Acid Bath, having done live streams and answering questions from fans. There are many clips of these on the Acid Bath archive, which I am very, very grateful for. Without his recollections, most of this history would be lost forever, and this project itself would not exist. Despite using news archives on the internet, it is still very hard to find much of anything about this band. In fact, I believe some of the things on Wikipedia I read were actually wrong, maybe half-truths on Wikipedia, or thinking of it now, he has more than enough information to write a book, which, Sammy, if you ever watch this video, I would be more than thrilled to talk to you. Absolutely. But anyway, I think one of the greatest appeals of Acid Bath, beyond everything else I've already mentioned, is honestly their appeal to true crime. At least now, as an adult, that's kind of what dragged me in. It also seems to have been clear that someone in the band, if not a few of the members, were fascinated by the cases of John Wayne Gacy, Dr. Kevorkian, and Richard Ramirez. Even though Rotten Records proposed the usage of Gacy's artwork on Kite String, this seems to have been an idea that the band liked, because they kept this theme at least 2 more times. Kite String really delved into the art that Gacy had. It practically is just littered all around it. People have an interest in crime, and if anything, I can imagine that Kite String sold just because it had Gacy's artwork in general. Believe it or not, there are crime collectors out there who will hoard anything having to do with a serial killer they've read about. I imagine that in the 90s, some people might have seen this as their only way to own a piece of Gacy's memorabilia, even if it wasn't the originals itself. There is the possibility that kite string may have gained popularity due to the multiple pieces of art by John Wayne Gacy. I wonder if Dax is into true crime, as his Project Dead Boy has the song, "Stop, I'm Already Dead." This is eerily similar to Abigail Folger's last words as she was murdered by Patricia Krenwinkel, where she is quoted as having said, "I give up. You got me. I'm already dead." Some sources also claim that she said, "Stop. I'm already dead." Granted, this could be a coincidence. The statement easily could become a song title anywhere. One thing I noticed about Kite String was that it was originally released on August 8th, 1994. That is just before the 25th anniversary of the Tate LaBianca murders, which is especially interesting since it was from an album that used a murderer's artwork. I do wonder if the person who supplied the Gacy artwork had anything from any of the Manson people, or maybe was hesitant about sending that one forth. I imagine 25 years after the Tate LaBianca murders, using maybe Susan Atkins artwork would make people flip out. Pagan Terrorism Tactics was released on November 12, 1996. Which, according to some sources, November 12th was Charles Manson's birthday. Other sources state that it was on November 11th. But either way, I find that both albums were released around renowned Manson dates. And to me, this is too coincidental. Despite my research, though, and through everything I read, and maybe somebody can very easily give me an answer as soon as I post this video, but I couldn't find an exact reason why they named the band Acid Bath. I suspect that this may have had to do with the acid bath killer John Haig, who was born on July 24th, 1909, and died on August 10th, 1949. The band was, in some ways, just at the right place at the right time. Despite the press from the 90s being afraid of the music, Dax's lyrics weren't bad. They were poetic and even beautiful in a way. They didn't have the disturbing messages that the media made it out to be, especially when you consider that Kite String released the same year as Age Ain't Nothing But a Number by Aaliyah. Criminals, ironically, had something to do with both albums in their cover art, with it actually looking like R. Kelly is in the background of Aaliyah's album. In 2022, both of these albums feature something by Criminals. The main difference is that one of the Criminals wrote the songs on the album, and it wasn't acid baths. Nowadays, the memory lives on with the fans. There have been fan pages which are now defunct and others still living. There are two great YouTube channels, one being Acid Bath Archive and Fans of Shroom. They both have videos showing Acid Bath's history, and the latter having uploaded Shroom's album at a time which I believe was before its digital release. As for Audie's son, he was born in July of 1997. In 1998, he had heart surgery, but he did great afterwards. He has since started a family of his own. I'm just so happy that after all of this time, he and his mother are fine, and that they're okay. And that is the tale of Acid Bath.